defendant also needs not have been sufficiently employing creating an emergency.
Okay.
Kate here over here.
She said that there has to be an immediate and imminent harm, and the defendant must not have been at fault at creating the emergency, but there's 4 more. Does anybody else want to volunteer an answer?
There are no legal alternatives.
Okay. So, what does that mean?
He exhausted himself and then
So you have no other option, okay? What else?
the harm created by the criminal acts, that's the harm that the individual is going to experience.
It also has to be, yeah,
Can you say that one more time? That what?
that the harm created is less than the harm confronted. Here you should consider whether or not X bringing the gun to school is greater harm than confronting gang members. What are the other elements for necessity? So we have immediate and imminent harm. We have that the defendants must not have been at fault at creating the emergency. The harm created is less than the harm confronted. Legal alternatives to violating the law have to be exhausted. And there's 2 more.
There should be a relationship between the acts, these acts, or the individual's act and the harm to be averted.
Yeah, so there has to be a causal relationship between the act and the averted harm.
Causal relationship for what?
Between the act and the averted harm. So think whether or not bringing a gun to school is actually going to prevent retaliation from the gang, which is why he started bringing the gun to begin with. And the last one, the criminal statute that was violated does not preclude the necessity defense. So whether or not there is a statute that is violated by the crime. These are all listed underneath the necessity in the book. So for this question, you need to discuss all of the elements and then conclude whether or not X would be successful in relying on the defense of necessity to the charge of possession of a dangerous weapon on school property. So basically all of these elements you need to apply to the scenario at hand and then reach a conclusion whether or not you'd be successful. So for question 2, you have several things that you need to consider. Can you help X's lawyer in making an argument that the killing of you was in self-defense? What are central points that the defense attorney should make? So What should the defense attorney argue? For self-defense. Is it gonna be easier for you guys if I reread the scenarios first? No? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. X, a juvenile, age 14, lives with X's uncle U. U drinks every night, and when drunk, U regularly and severely beats X. X has suffered numerous broken bones and has been permanently disfigured and emotionally damaged. The beatings have persisted for over a year. Whenever U starts drinking, X becomes fearful that the beatings will begin. U starts drinking and tells X that U will take care of X later in the evening. X has reached the end of X's capacity to absorb the beatings, and X has no relatives or friends with whom X can depend on to protect X. U collapses on the couch in a drunken state, and X removes U's gun from U's bedroom and shoots and kills U when U is sleeping. Can you help X's lawyer in making an argument that the killing of U was in self-defense? So what are the central points that you need to argue for this to be self-defense?
X was constantly being beat for a whole year.
He was not the aggressor.
Okay.
Harm had to be imminent and about to happen.
Okay. And so any reasonable belief that the crime would happen. And the necessity, so he had no other options. Now, can any of you think of a case in the book that's similar to this one?
I can't think of the name, but, with the woman when she kills her husband.
State v. Norman.
Yeah. She did it because she said that he, beat her, I think, and, she was afraid for her life. So, she did it when he was asleep because he was much bigger than her. And if he was awake, she didn't think that she would be able to keep the action. I can't remember more than that, but.
Yeah. So in this case, you can kind of see the reasoning.
What was the name of that case?
It is State v. Norman,
What page is that?
229.
But they granted her self-defense, right? Did she?
Reversal, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you have to help the prosecutor in arguing that the killing was not self-defense. What should the prosecutor argue? And here you need to disregard any possible defense that X potentially may have based on his age.
He was sleeping, so there was no immediate threat. The aggressor was the little kid this time, and the use of force was more. It was not balanced out because he was sleeping. So we're gonna be the opposite.
Yeah. So you need to consider the proportionality. Are his actions proportional to the beatings? You need to consider the fact that he collapsed on the couch, so that would mean that he temporarily retreated.
He could have escaped.
And you need to consider whether or not the harm was imminent and immediate, which is also the case that was argued at State v. Norman. Okay, so question number 3. X is approached by a gang leader and told that the gang wants X to fly to New York City and to deliver narcotics to an affiliated gang. X is told by the gang leader that if X does not cooperate, that X's spouse and child will be harmed. X is warned not to talk to anyone about their conversation. The gang leader tells X that the gang will be following X and that if if X approaches law enforcement, that X will place X's family at risk. The gang leader immediately drives X to the airport and puts X on a plane. X arrives at the airport in New York City and is approached by 2 drug enforcement agency agents who have been tipped off that X will be arriving with narcotics. As the agents approach and flash their badges, X flees from the agents and eventually is seized and arrested. The agents search X and X's luggage and discover narcotics. X plans to rely on the defense of duress. Will he be successful? In answering this question, consult the Contento Patron case in the textbook. So, can somebody tell me what the case United States v. Contento Patron is about? What are the issues of that case?
It's the same thing, sort of like this one.
What's the thing that is the same?
He was threatened. In the case, they were trying to explain that he was not immediate, but the fact that he was being followed around, it was a threat.
So one of the elements of duress is immediate threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What else?
They say that in the case, it would be unreasonable for him to escape, like, leave his job. He just, like, run out, like, from the gambler. So it was kind of unreasonable for him to escape. And the last one...
So there's no reasonable opportunity to escape,
Yeah.
okay?
And the last one, I forgot. I think it was the fact that he contacted that he collaborated with the police or something like that once he was in a safe place.
Mm-hmm. Did X do that?
No, he didn't in this case.
Okay, so in this case, you need to list the elements of duress and compare and contrast this case with the one in the textbook. Which is basically what she said. Those 3 elements.
So you do need a mental case. in your
Yeah,
index.
Contento Patron. It's on page 305.
What's the third part of it?
So the elements of duress, the immediate threat of death or serious bodily injury, no reasonable opportunity to escape the threatened harm, well-grounded fear that the threat will be carried out. And then the last thing she mentioned is the defendant must submit to proper authorities, which happened in the textbook but did not in the case in question number 3.
What was the first one?
Immediate threat of death and serious bodily injury. You get to go to question number 4? Okay. X manufactures illegal chemical narcotics that X sells to street gangs. G, an undercover government agent, approaches X and offers X a difficult-to-obtain ingredient that X relies on to manufacture unlawful chemical narcotics. In return, G wants 1/2 of the manufactured chemical narcotics. G also tells X that G will put X in touch with individuals who will purchase the narcotics. G gives X the crucial ingredient, and when the narcotics have been manufactured, puts X in touch with another government agent, B, who poses as a leader of a street gang. As X sells the narcotics to undercover agent B, X is arrested. Will X be successful in relying on the predisposition test for entrapment? Let's start with defining the predisposition test. What does it mean?
To determine if the government induced the crime.
Well, that's basically entrapment.
That-
So, yeah, so there are 2 elements that you need to fulfill in the subjective test to see whether or not it is entrapment. So, one of them would be the predisposition, and the other would be inducement. So whether or not the government induced. So with the predisposition, that basically means that the individual has to already have, if an individual already has a predisposition to commit the crime,